God, look at her, my mother whispered, her voice sharp enough to slice through the chatter of the graduation hall. Even the gown can't hide how awkward she looks. My father laughed, that cruel, dismissive kind of laugh that made my stomach knot. At least she finished high school. Maybe she'll find someone desperate enough to take her. And then came the final blow. My sister Lila, my beautiful, perfect sister, leaned over and said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "She's the ugly graduate. Guess every family needs one." The people around us chuckled. My heart didn't. It broke. I stood there holding my diploma, trying not to cry as they took photos with her and barely looked at me. My mother refused to let me in the family picture. "You'll ruin it," she said. "Let Lila shine for once." That was the day they decided I wasn't one of them anymore. My name is Hannah Carter. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because what happened next was the moment my family disowned me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own home? Like love was a privilege you somehow failed to earn? When the ceremony ended, I walked toward them, my heart begging for 1 ounce of warmth. My father's hand went up, stopping me mid-step. "You're 18 now," he said flatly. "It's time to make your own way. We've done enough." Enough? They turned, walked away with Lila, and left me standing in the parking lot, still in my graduation gown, clutching my diploma like it could replace a family. That night, I knocked on our front door, the house I'd lived in for 18 years, and my mother answered with her arms crossed. "We talked about this," she said. "You're on your own now." "Mom," I whispered, "I don't have anywhere to go." She looked at me the way someone might look at a stray cat that wandered too close. "You should have thought about that before embarrassing us for years." The door clicked shut, and through the thin wood I heard my sister's laughter. I slept on the porch that night. The same porch where we used to carve pumpkins, eat popsicles, and dream about the future. But that future didn't have me in it anymore. As dawn crept across the sky, I made myself a silent promise, one I would keep for the next 11 years. I would become someone they couldn't ignore. Someone they'd regret losing. Because if I was their ugly daughter, then I'd show them just how beautiful revenge could be. The morning after my parents locked me out, the world felt too bright, like it didn't care I'd just lost everything. I sat on the curb in my graduation gown, the fabric stiff with sweat and humiliation. Cars passed by, people stared, but no one stopped. It was like grief had turned me invisible. By noon I was starving. I counted the last of my money, $23.47. That was all I had to my name. A convenience store clerk let me use the restroom, and when I caught my reflection in the mirror, red eyes, tangled hair, trembling hands, I almost didn't recognize myself. That was the first time I whispered it aloud. "They left me." I said it again, louder. "They left me." And something inside me hardened. My name is Hannah Carter, and this is the part where I stopped begging for love and started fighting for my life. That night I found a rundown motel on the edge of town. The kind that smelled like cigarettes and secrets. The old man behind the counter looked me up and down and said, "You look like you could use a break, kid." I handed him $20, my first desperate trade for a roof. He gave me a key and said, "Room 7. Don't open the door for anyone." The bed creaked when I sat on it. I stared at the water-stained ceiling until the tears came again. Then I reached for my phone. No texts. No calls. Not from my mom, not from my dad. And definitely not from Lila. It was like I'd died and no one noticed. I found a part-time job the next morning at a local diner called Mabel's Corner, wiping tables and refilling coffee cups. The pay was trash, but the owner, Mabel, had kind eyes. She didn't ask questions. "You got heart, kid," she told me once after I stayed late to mop the floors. "Don't let the world turn it cold." Her words stuck to me like sunlight on bruised skin. Weeks turned into months. I saved every dollar I could, skipped meals, and studied community college courses online at night from the library. Every time exhaustion pulled at me, I saw their faces again. My mother's sneer, my father's disappointment, Lila's smug grin. And that image fueled me. By the end of the year, I had enough to enroll in night classes for graphic design. I was good, really good. The professors noticed. "You have a unique eye, Hannah," one said. "You see beauty where others don't." I smiled, but inside I thought, that's because I was forced to. Years passed. I climbed slowly. I designed flyers, then websites, then entire brand campaigns. My style was bold, emotional, impossible to ignore. When people asked about my story, I'd just say, I'm self-made. But deep down needed me gone. Now they needed me back. My name is Hannah Carter, and from wherever you're watching this, tell me honestly, what would you do if the people who threw you away came crawling back? I closed my laptop and leaned back, the city lights spilling through my window. My studio was small but beautiful. Polished floors, a desk covered in sketches and brand mock-ups, a shelf of awards from design expos. Every piece of success I had was built from the ashes of their rejection. And now, they wanted a handout. For a moment I almost deleted the email. But then something inside me whispered, not yet. I wanted to see them. I wanted to look into their eyes and watch the recognition hit. The realization that the daughter they mocked had become the woman they needed. So I replied. To Lila Carter. Lila. It's been a long time. I'll think about it. Hannah. 2 days later I got another email. This time with an address. My parents' old house in Marietta, Georgia. The same house they'd locked me out of 11 years ago. Apparently they never left. The irony stung. I booked a flight. Business class. My first ever. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window and felt something powerful rise inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Control. The kind I'd been denied all my life. When I arrived, the house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint peeling, the porch sagging, the once proud garden now overrun with weeds. I stood at the gate, suitcase in hand, my heart a storm. The door opened. Lila stood there, older, thinner, but still striking. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Hannah. I smiled faintly. You look surprised. You look different. I stepped closer. Beautiful. I said softly, watching the color drain from her face. Behind her I heard my mother's voice, weak and hoarse. Who's at the door? Lila turned. It's Hannah. For a long second, silence. Then the sound of slow footsteps. My mother appeared, her hair gray, her body frail, but her eyes, still sharp. Well, she said, her voice brittle. You actually came. Looks like you needed me after all, I said quietly. Her lips tightened. Don't start with your attitude, Hannah. We're desperate. I tilted my head. You mean you're desperate? My father was on the couch, coughing, thinner than I remembered. He barely looked at me. And in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of everything they'd stolen from me, I realized something. They hadn't just lost their money. They'd lost their pride. And I was about to make sure they never got it back. They wanted my help. I wanted to watch them beg. The kitchen smelled like cheap soup and old regrets. Lila explained everything while I rinsed a chipped mug and listened like a lawyer at a deposition. Foreclosure papers. Hospital bills. An invitation to a creditor meeting stamped for next Tuesday. Dad's medication, $1,200 a month. The mortgage arrears, $42,000. The hospital bill that had swallowed their savings, $86,742.19. Numbers that ate at a life until there was nothing left but hunger and shame. You could talk to them, Lila said, fragile at the edges. You know people. Maybe you can. Her voice cracked on the last word. I could hear the same old entitlement in her pleading. Assume I'll fold, give me a hand, let me back into the warmth. My name is Hannah Carter and I had learned how to make kindness look like a sword. For 11 years I'd been sharpening it quietly. Education, savings, connections, reputation. Tonight I decided to dress my revenge as mercy. Show me what you can, I said. Everything. Bank accounts. Insurance papers. Who's handling the estate? She handed me a messy stack, receipts, overdue notices, a single insurance policy that barely covered half of Dad's hospital stay. Their pride had been their vault, now it leaked. Lila watched me like a patient watches a surgeon's hands. I smiled, but inwardly I was mapping. First, stabilization. I wired $5,000 from an account they didn't know existed, an emergency I'd prepared for myself and never touched. It would buy them time but not forgiveness. That's the difference between charity and leverage. I paid the immediate hospital charge and covered the next month's prescriptions. Lila cried, and for a second, I let her think it was my mercy that had done it. Then I set the bait. You need to get revenue, I said. Not loans. Not charity. Real visible income. I can help rebrand the house as a short-term rental. The neighborhood is pretty. People want nostalgia. We'll call it the Carter Homestead. I'll design the pages, manage bookings, and take a percentage. Pay the mortgage and save face. Lila's relief was a physical thing. You'd do that? Of course, I said. For a fee. I watched the color leave her like a tide. Think of it as professional rates. I'll be fair. The plan was perfect because it sounded like salvation. It felt like forgiveness. It also gave me control. I would be inside their finances, their calendar, their social media. The very scaffolding of their attempt to rebound. I'd make them visible again, but on my terms. As I worked that night, sketching a logo that winked at their faded Americana and writing copy that made the leak-stained porch sound rustic charm, I felt the old hunger return, not for wealth but for acknowledgement. For the sharp, delicious moment when they would have to look at their screens and see my name in the reservation confirmation, see that the woman they discarded now held the key to their survival. I set up the landing page with photographs I staged. Soft lights, clean linens, a faux family portrait with a tasteful blur where one face used to be. I wrote a friendly bio that hinted at small-town history and big hospitality. I scheduled the listing to go live the next morning. Before I left, I placed an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, a contract. My terms were simple and public. A percentage and transparency. Beneath it, a single line I knew would sting more than money. If you want my help, you agree to let me run it. They were desperate. Pride had a price and tonight they would pay it. Or refuse and watch the bank sell everything to someone else while my name remained a ghost in their mouths. I walked out into the dark, the chilly night wrapping around me like a cloak. Through the window I watched Lila unfold the contract, her hands trembling. The porch light flickered. For the first time in years I felt the scale tip. Someone had to feed the wolves. Someone had to hold the leash. I intended to be both. I slept in my old room that night. The one with the crooked ceiling fan and the poster tacked above the bed, and the mattress still held the faint, stubborn shape of my childhood. It felt like a relic, like a thing they'd kept for the story, not for comfort. Morning light leaked through the curtains. My phone buzzed before my eyes were fully open. A reservation. 3 nights. $250 a night. A deposit of $750. Paid already. Booked through a platform that listed the host as H. Carter. Designer and curator. My pulse stuttered. For 11 years I had wanted to be seen. Now my name glowed on a screen in their house in big, unignorable letters. I dressed fast, combed my hair with deliberate care, and walked into the kitchen where Lila hovered over coffee like it was a treaty. She looked different with worry chiseling her face. Worry ages people faster than any insult. My mother sat with a phone in hand, scrolling, eyes darting. Someone booked, Lila said, unable to keep the mix of triumph and fear out of her voice. We made money last month, but this could help. Good, I said. The control tasted like metal in my mouth, cold and intoxicating. I walked them through the operations I'd installed. Instant messaging templates for guests, a code for the lock, a cleaning schedule, small welcome gifts I'd had printed with the house's new logo. I told them about my fee, 20% of gross bookings, and explained how transparency worked. Everything goes through the platform. You'll have statements every 2 weeks. I'll handle marketing, inquiries, and photos. Lila's lip trembled. Isn't that a lot? Another. The decor is beautiful. Who did it? My name sat on the screen and in the margins like a brand. Lila watched a notification pop up. A local lifestyle blogger wanted to feature the homestead in a weekend piece. A neighbor called to ask who was doing the bookings. My mother, who had once told me to vanish, now asked in a voice so small I almost didn't recognize it, "Do you think this can save us?" I answered with a half-smile. It already is. That afternoon Lila caught me in the hallway. She pressed a wrinkled piece of paper into my hand, a flyer she drafted in black marker. Help wanted, host assistant. Apply within. Her eyes held something I hadn't expected, a pleading that was almost a child's. "Isn't asking for help what we do now?" she whispered. Yes. But we didn't do it the same way. They had begged back then with entitlement. Now they asked with humility. There is a difference between assuming you are owed and owning the cost of your misstep. That night I sat alone on the porch, watching lamplight move through the living room window. On the coffee table lay the guest book, open to the first entry. Lovely stay, felt like home. My name was already in the metadata of a dozen posts. For the first time since graduation, they couldn't pretend they didn't know who I was. I poured myself coffee and raised the mug like a toast. To what I didn't say out loud. To recognition. To the sound of my name when it echoed in their mouths with no escape. Tomorrow, a blogger prints a piece that mentions my design work. The town will talk. The bank may still come knocking. But tonight I savored one small victory. Their need had turned into my stage. And as I closed the guest book, a single line caught my eye, written in a careful looping hand at the bottom of the page. To the one who made this place beautiful again, thank you. I traced the ink with my finger and smiled. They had asked for help. They had received it. I had given them salvation that carried a price, and it would cost them everything they believed they owned. The morning the article dropped, my phone became a chorus. Notifications chimed like a castanet. Messages from strangers, DM requests, booking inquiries stacking up like dominoes. The local lifestyle blogger had done what I'd known she would. She framed the Carter homestead around restoration and H. Carter's delicate touch. My name was in the headline. My face was in the side column. They called me a hometown prodigy. They called the house a phoenix. They called Lila, the brave sister keeping things going. Brave. The word curdled in my mouth. I watched the town wake up to the version of me I had built. Competent, quiet, unignorable. I watched my mother's hands tremble as she read the piece aloud at the kitchen table. She held the phone like it might burn her if she let it fall. You did this? Lila asked, voice thin as glass. I did, I said. My answer landed between us, heavy and unavoidable. Success arrived fast and sharp. Bookings quadrupled. The blog's traffic funneled people to our platform, and money began to stitch the house back together. For the first time since foreclosure notices had landed like winter frost, the numbers looked alive. We were trending. But visibility has teeth. Along with praise came curiosity. A few commenters dug up old posts, high school photos, a class scoreboard, the local forum that chronicled who's who. Someone linked to that graduation picture. The one where I stood on the periphery, clutching a diploma like a secret. I'd never seen it online before. I'd seen it in my head 1,000 times. The caption beneath the image read, "The Carter family at Hannah's graduation." There were 6 faces in the frame. One face was blurred, cropped away as if someone had taken scissors to memory. Lila's fingers went to her mouth. My mother's eyes hardened into something I recognized, fear that wore the shape of regret. I felt the compass of my plan swing. My name is Hannah Carter, and I had never wanted them to suffer for the sake of cruelty. I wanted them to remember what they did. I wanted them to understand the hollow sound of being erased. So I made a choice that felt like a blade wrapped in velvet. I called a town hall meeting under the guise of a heritage weekend, sponsored by the homestead. I invited neighbors, the blogger, local press. I told Lila she would host a small talk, a reconciliation panel. Her hands shook when I told her. You want me to? She asked. Yes, I said. You'll tell the truth. She swallowed and agreed, because when survival is at stake, even the proud barter for dignity. On the day, the community hall smelled of coffee and old curtains. I sat in the back watching the stage as Lila stood under the spotlight. She talked about foreclosure and hospitals and how hard it had been. The audience softened. People nodded. Halfway through, a woman from the front row raised her hand and asked, "What about the daughter you left behind?" Every eye turned. Lila's face flushed. She faltered. Then, in a voice that cracked like winter ice, she said, We made choices. And then painfully, vulnerably, we treated Hannah like she didn't matter. The words were small meteors. They hit and left craters. I could have ended there, caught the soft human apology and accepted it like a bomb. But the meeting needed to be more than confession. It needed to be accountability that echoed beyond the hall. After the Q&A, I stood. I told the room what they needed to hear, but gently, in a way that made everyone uneasy because it was true. I described being 18 in a parking lot, the soft click of my mother's door, the way a sister's laugh can feel like a verdict. I didn't hurl blame like a weapon. I delivered it like testimony. People leaned in. The blogger wrote notes like prayer. A local woman, one of the guests who had stayed at the homestead, handed me an envelope. Inside was a photograph, the same graduation image, but this print showed something new. Someone had written on the back in my mother's hand, "Don't let her back into our lives. She will ruin everything. The penmanship shook with years of conviction. Lila's jaw worked. My mother's shoulders folded as if a wind had entered her ribs. I closed my fist around the photo and felt briefly triumphant. Not because I had exposed them, but because the truth was no longer optional. Memory had been called to the stage and there was no way to leave without answering for what it had cost me. Outside, the homestead's guest book filled with new entries. Love notes, polite critiques, small sketches. Inside, a family tried to stitch itself back together under conditions they had once refused to meet. And in that thin electric moment, with the room buzzing, the money flowing, the town whispering my name like a new scripture, I understood the real currency of what I'd been buying. Recognition. At last. The week after the town hall, everything changed. The Carter homestead wasn't just a house anymore. It was a story. The local paper called it the Redemption House. Strangers stopped by to take photos not of the porch or the willow tree but of me. The prodigal daughter. The one who turned rejection into art. Lila said people in town were calling her brave. My mother said she couldn't go to church without someone whispering, how proud she must be. The irony was a knife twisting quietly under my ribs. Because pride was all they had left, and even that had my fingerprints on it. One afternoon I caught my mother staring at me across the living room. She was smaller now, almost fragile, the sharpness of her old cruelty worn down by years of loss. You really built all this, she said softly. I did, I replied. And, you did it without us. I held her gaze. That was the point. Her eyes filled but I didn't move. I wasn't sure if the ache in my chest was victory or grief. Maybe both. That night I checked the homestead's online dashboard. Bookings, full for 6 months. Revenue, $68,000 pending. Reviews, all 5 stars. Then one new message appeared from a producer in Los Angeles. Hi Hannah. We read about your family story in Southern Heritage magazine. We're developing a documentary series on second chances. We'd love to feature you and your parents. Interested? My pulse skipped. This was bigger than revenge. This was legacy. I closed the laptop. I met the producer on a video call. She asked me to describe my story in 1 sentence. I said, they called me ugly when I was 18. 11 years later I built something too beautiful for them to destroy. He loved it. We filmed the first segments that week. Exterior shots, interviews, family photos. Every camera flash felt like light justice had been saving just for me. But something happened during filming that I hadn't planned. The director asked my mother to describe me as a child. I waited, braced for venom. Instead her voice broke. She used to draw, she said. All the time. She'd sit on the porch for hours. I'd tell her it was a waste. I was wrong. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real. The camera panned to me and for the first time in over a decade I didn't know what to say. The revenge I had built so perfectly began to tremble under the weight of something heavier. Truth. Later that night I found her sitting on the porch. The same porch she'd once locked me out of. She looked up as I stepped into the light. I didn't know how to love you then, she said quietly. You were too much like me, stubborn, proud. I thought breaking you would make you stronger. It did, I said. But it also broke me. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. And I'm sorry. The apology was small. Too late. But real. For the first time I didn't feel like a ghost haunting this house. I felt like a woman standing in the ruins of something she had finally outgrown. As I looked out into the yard I realized something. Revenge had brought me back but forgiveness was the only thing that could set me free. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the real ending. The documentary aired on a Sunday evening. The same day 11 years ago I'd slept on that porch with nothing but a diploma and a broken heart. Now my name, Hannah Carter, glowed across TV screens in living rooms, cafes and online streams across the country. The title card read, The Ugly Graduate, a story of family, forgiveness and fire. I didn't breathe for the first few minutes. The camera swept through the Carter homestead, golden light, restored wood, slow pans across framed photos. My designs. My colors. My hand in every corner. Then my voice filled the room, steady, calm, older. I was 18 when my parents disowned me. They called me ugly, worthless, a burden. 11 years later I came home, not for revenge but for remembrance. They played my mother's interview next. The room fell silent as her words cracked like old wood. I tried to break her spirit, and she built a life out of the pieces. Lila cried on screen. My father, frail, thin but lucid, said, I was proud once of the wrong child. I see that now. I didn't expect that line. Cut through me not as revenge but as release. When it ended, the credits rolled over the sound of the wind brushing through the willow tree outside our house. The world saw what we had buried. And for the first time it didn't hurt. It just was. The next week, everything shifted. The homestead flooded with bookings. Strangers sent letters, not to pity me but to thank me. Women wrote about finding courage after being told they were nothing. Men wrote about realizing what silence does to daughters. One letter stood out. It came from a girl in Ohio. I watched your story with my mom. She said she saw herself in yours. She apologized to me for the first time. I cried then, not because of pain but because healing had finally done what vengeance couldn't. It spread. One evening I walked alone through the homestead yard. The air was warm, thick with the smell of rain and pine. The porch light glowed soft gold. Inside, my mother and Lila were sitting together. Quietly, peacefully. No raised voices. No tension. Just two people who had learned that love isn't ownership. I didn't join them. I just stood outside watching, remembering. Because some goodbyes don't need words. I took a final look at the house. The same one that had thrown me out and now stood rebuilt, humble, human. My story had come full circle and for once I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I had already won. Not because I made them pay, but because I made myself free.